I was looking for it out on the internet because I wanted a homemade drain auger and I couldn't find one. So this is my custom designed drain auger with a 3-gallon bucket, some 2x6s, an old pipe, and a carriage bowl and a couple other things I'll show you in a sec. Just to prove that it actually works, I'm going to snake this drain here. So this is just a floor drain in my basement. And I have a spiral end on there, and I have it hooked up to a 1/2-inch drill, and it actually works pretty darn well. The only problem with using the 1/2-inch drill is if you use a cordless like I do, it has a brake on it, and with the momentum it's going to burn out that brake. So I'd recommend just using a regular power drill that doesn't have a brake. But here it is. Definitely works, definitely does the job. I've used it several times. And in a minute here, I'll show you how I put it together. So here's my material list. I used a 3-gallon bucket from an old drywall bucket with a lid. I put a bottom made of 3/4 plywood. I used an old piece of 1/2-inch pipe popping off an old chair. I used a 3/8 carriage bolt, 2 3/8 locking nuts, and a couple washers, and the rest of the frame was framed out with old chunks of 2x6. Here's a diagram I threw together so you can see how I put it together. So that pipe, you could probably use a 1/2-inch copper pipe. Like I said, this pipe was just a piece of pipe off an old chair. That floats through the two vertical supports. There's those two 2x6s, goes through the lid and gets wedged in tight in the hole in that lid support there. The bottom is reinforced with a 3/4 piece of plywood that I beveled and cut in the bottom. And then I ran my carriage bolt through that and through a hole in the bottom of the bucket. And then I tapped that carriage bolt into the plywood so it would kind of sit tight to it. Screwed the plywood in through the bottom of the bucket, and then I tightened it up with the lock nuts, threw a washer on there that goes through the other vertical support, another washer and a lock nut, and then it leaves the end of that carriage bolt exposed so I have enough for my drill to grip on to turn the whole unit, and then that whole bolt then turns the entire bucket. So here you can see how I cut that bottom. It's a piece of 3/4 plywood, and I did it, I traced the bottom out and sanded a bevel on it so it fit nice and tight with the bottom. I didn't even have to glue it in, it was such a tight fit. I drilled a 3/8 hole through the bottom of the bucket with a spade bit. I also drilled that hole through that plywood, and then I set that carriage bolt by just tapping it through with a hammer so it poked out the other side. And again, the carriage bolt seats itself then, so now it'll turn the entire bucket. I also put a couple screws through the bottom of the bucket into the plywood there to secure everything together. Here I drilled a hole for the front support where the pipe goes through, a little bit larger, so it would spin through the 2x6. So I mean, obviously you could put a bearing or something in there, but I really didn't need to be that sophisticated. So this just spins through the 2x6 with that 1/2-inch piece of pipe. Here's the frame I built. It's just 3 2x6s screwed together. There's a 3/8 hole and the one on the right, and then the 9/16 hole on the one on the left to let everything spin through it. Here you can see where I did think I needed some type of stop, so I drilled a hole and welded a nut. It was a bad weld because my gas was out at the time. I welded the nut onto the pipe, and then I welded a wing nut onto a bolt, and then that way I can just hand tighten that on the snake in case the snake is slipping and isn't turning with the pipe. Especially when you get towards the end, you kind of need to use that. Here's a look inside, and it really just self-coils itself around the inside of the bucket. You have to get it started, but it really just pushes itself around the bucket, and that's really all you need. I thought I needed something more sophisticated, but I don't. And here you can also see how I screwed that support underneath the lid there to give the pipe more meat to hold on to, and I just ran a couple drywall screws through there. Ultimately, this thing didn't cost me anything to build because it was mostly just stuff I had laying around my house. But obviously there is the cost of the actual snake and the ends. So when I went to the store, the only way I could get a 50-foot snake without buying the entire machine was to buy a replacement auger. So I got this brass crass replacement auger for $45, and obviously it only came with the snake, so I needed the ends, and the ends were $25. So for about $70 and some scrap, now I have a working 50-foot power auger. I've used it several times. It works great for me. Plus, it was kind of fun to build it. I just wanted to see if I could do it. So hopefully, somebody else out there maybe tries and builds one and saves a couple bucks. So give it a shot. Let me know what you think.